Welcome, friend. I'm Jack, host of the channel, and today we're diving into another episode. Pour yourself a drink and get comfortable, because I've got a powerful story coming your way. If something hits deep, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it.
Late spring in Utah can sometimes be unpredictable. This May was unusually rainy and warm. Usually, I would have to mow my lawn for the first time in early April, but not this year. At least it wasn't snowing. This time last year, we had a snowstorm that dropped 8 inches on the area. I think having to mow the lawn early is worth being thankful for the lack of snow. And with tax season over, it was nice to get outside into the sunshine. My house has an interesting feature. The backyard slopes heavily downward, leading to a small stream in the woods behind us. When they built the house, they used backfill to level the front of the house with the road, resulting in a steep slope about halfway up the side of the house. Thus, the basement, completely closed at the front, ended up exposed at the back. This allowed me to install a double-leaf service door so I could drag my lawnmower and other lawn supplies in there instead of cluttering up the garage. This was one of my favorite features of the house. I was done with the mower and everything was in place. I'm allergic to grass, so I couldn't wait to go upstairs and shower. I had almost reached the top step when I heard my wife's voice. While I was mowing in front of the house, I saw her friend's car, so I wasn't surprised to hear voices. But then I heard what was being said, and it made my hand pause as I reached for the door. I think I should start by introducing myself. My name is Tom Parker. I prefer to be called Tom, but in school they called me Tommy. I didn't mind, but the show aired before I was born, so it doesn't count as a pop culture reference anymore. When I graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in accounting, I was still called Tommy. After graduating, I earned my CPA degree in the shortest amount of time required, and I'm currently working for a large firm in Salt Lake City as a team leader, doing audits and the like. It's not the most exciting position, but it pays very well, and I've been able to see the inner workings of many companies. I have a special gift for forensic analytics, building financial trails to investigate things like fraud and money laundering. I'm considered an expert and was even asked to advise the FBI on 2 cases. My wife, Emily, was a political science and business major planning to pursue a law degree when we met early in our freshman year. I was sitting, waiting for the first day of classes, when she walked in. Emily had a tall, slender figure, like a ballerina, only with slightly larger breasts. Her long brown hair flowed loosely over her bare shoulders. It was a beautiful sight. She wore a lovely sundress with sandals that emphasized her amazing legs, smooth and elastic. The mixture of innocence and sexuality was too strong. I was overcome with instant lust. Unfortunately, Emily wasn't sitting next to me, and she was not assigned to my group project. It took me 4 weeks to approach her and break the ice. I made a stupid joke, and she laughed. It wasn't a graceful giggle, but a full-blown laugh. We started talking, and I asked her if she wanted to have coffee after class. "I've been waiting for your question for 4 weeks," she smiled in response. The last 2 years of college, we were rarely apart. Our parents weren't too happy, but during our senior year, we moved in together. They saw how devoted we were to each other and soon came to terms with it. I couldn't imagine how things could get even better, but that's what happened. I graduated from university and immediately took a job at one of the large accounting firms in Salt Lake City. I was making a ridiculous amount of money for a recently graduated 23-year-old. Emily was accepted into the University of Utah Law School, and we stayed in our student apartment. My company offered to pay for my MBA degree, so I took classes too. I rode the light rail to work every day, so I didn't need a car, and it cut down on costs. 3 years later, Emily graduated from university, and I proposed to her during a birthday dinner at a fancy steakhouse in downtown Salt Lake City. 6 months later, we got married. Emily accepted a position as a deputy district attorney in the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office. We decided to buy a house in Sandy, which was close to her parents' house. It was a great starter home with 3 bedrooms. One bedroom was equipped as an office with 2 desks. I sometimes worked from home, and Emily needed her own space for her legal work. The other bedroom would be the guest room, and of course, the last room would be our master bedroom. Emily convinced me that this was a built-in nanny option once we had kids. I was an only child and always wanted to have brothers and sisters. Emily and I had talked about having kids since freshman year and agreed to wait until Emily was settled in her career before we started trying. But now we've reached this point, and 2 nights ago, we agreed to stop taking Emily's birth control and start trying for a baby. I was happier than ever before, and then I heard something that made my hand linger on the doorknob. Tom and I decided it was time for me to get pregnant, Emily announced excitedly. This delighted her friend, Anna Mitchell. Both women made the same high-frequency noise that made me think of whales accidentally beaching themselves off the Oregon coast. Standing on the stairs, I grinned at their excitement, which matched my own at becoming a father. Reaching for the handle again, I heard a question that wiped the grin off my face and the happiness right out of me. "This is wonderful, Emily," said Anna. "But what are you going to do with Dave, the florist?" Emily calmed her friend down. "Tom is outside mowing the lawn." There was a pause, and I could almost see her looking around, waiting for me to appear. Then she spoke again. "I already told Dave that I'm ending the affair. He didn't mind. After Dave steps down as senator, he thinks he has a real chance. Getting caught having an affair with a married employee would be very unpleasant." 3 sentences destroyed my world. Dave Carson was Emily's boss in the DAS office. He was a widower, about 47 years old. His wife, Mary, died of breast cancer, leaving him a single father to their daughter, Sarah. Dave was a true political animal, and Emily had told me stories about his maneuvering within his party to run for higher office. It looks like I just found out how my wife got access to all this secret information. "Is it true?" Anna said. "Just cold turkey. You've been hot and serious for 6 months, and now you're just going to give it up?" The teasing doubt in her voice made me want to rip Anna's head off. She was a classmate at Utah State, and I knew her before Emily. I knew Emily and Anna were best friends now, but I always thought she was still my friend. Looks like I was wrong about this. Stop it," Emily protested, giggling. "You're so bad. Dave is a great lover, but he was just rough to play with. I love Tom, but Dave just took me and used me the way he wanted. There was no love, only rough sex and power. Now that Tom and I are going to have a baby, I don't want to take any chances. I love Tom, and I will be a good and faithful mother." How many more cliches are we going to have here? I asked myself. All I still need to be completely happy is to come home, find an unfamiliar car in the driveway, and discover that they are having an affair in my bed. I wanted to run into the room and scream, destroy the room, but my muscles were paralyzed. I was so stunned that I couldn't move. My heart was beating in my ears. "So, cold turkey?" Anna asked again, and Emily's giggle followed. "Well, not cold turkey," she admitted. "Next week, I have a conference with Dave in Seattle. We'll have our farewell party there. I'll miss the romance, but Tom and the baby are more important." I couldn't stand it anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I love Emily, but this was killing me. My business education began to make itself felt. I needed to step back and think. I needed to make a plan. I started stomping up the steps as if I was climbing stairs, then opened the door and entered the kitchen. Emily and Anna sat there with cups of tea in front of them. Was this a hint of guilt that I saw on Emily's face? "Honey, are you okay?" she asked worriedly. Then I realized that my cheeks were covered with tears. "Allergies," I muttered. "It will be a bad spring." "Well, go upstairs and take a shower. Just throw these clothes near the bathroom, and I'll wash them right away so they don't mess up your closet. Last week, I bought you a new package of Claritin D, which is in the medicine cabinet." "Thank you," I managed to say, heading toward the stairs. I needed time to think. The next morning was Thursday, and I used the excuse of an early meeting to get up and out of the house before Emily got out of bed. The night before, I used my allergies as an excuse to go to bed early because my emotions were on edge. Sitting on the train, I thought again about what I had heard. On one hand, my wife was unfaithful, but it had all ended purely in a physical sense. She wanted to stay with me and give birth to my child. Some would say that I should leave things as they are and be happy that my wife is returning to the marriage with plans to be a good wife and mother. However, there was a voice in my head that said, if she did it once, what would stop her from doing it again in the future? 10 years from now, when the kids go to school, will she have another affair? Then what? Divorce with children, where Emily will most likely get the kids, and I will get a big bill for child support. As an accountant and business analyst, I thought in terms of risk and reward. I found myself doing the same thing here. It got to the point where my trust in my wife was completely destroyed. The just physical excuse misses what is truly important in such cases. This is a complete lack of respect for your partner. The cheater knows that what they are doing is wrong and that they are hurting the other person. Otherwise, they would have done it openly, and I would have known about it from the very beginning. Don't get me wrong, I don't think I would ever come to terms with her sleeping with Dave, but at least if she talked to me about it, there would be some respect shown. Emily's actions showed me how much she truly respected me. I was working, but part of my brain was focused on what I should be doing. I had no evidence other than the overheard conversation. I hadn't even noticed anything different during the last 6 months, during which this affair apparently continued. A direct confrontation without evidence would be high risk with little chance of reward. Emily would deny it, and Dave Carson would deny it. Taking any case through the courts would have been financial suicide since every judge, politician, and lawyer in the surrounding counties knew Carson. I would have been buried to keep his name clear. I thought about just leaving and starting over somewhere else. It was tempting, but the house would be like an anchor around my neck. Emily couldn't afford it on her salary alone, and we had almost no equity. She would have to sell it almost immediately to avoid foreclosure, and in today's market, that was unlikely. It would ruin both my credit reputation and hers. Being a CPA with a bad credit history is not the best decision when looking for a new position. How can anyone trust you with other people's money if you clearly don't know how to handle your own? I needed proof before I could do anything. I would have had none if it hadn't come from the most unlikely source. 3 days later, I kept myself under control, but still had not found any evidence to support what I had heard. Her personal laptop was clean. No secret email accounts were discovered. No sexy lingerie hidden in a box in the back of the closet. No receipts from places she shouldn't have gone. Absolutely nothing. Then Emily called me at work and said we were invited to a political announcement party at Dave Carson's house on Friday night. I assumed this would be his big announcement of his candidacy for a seat in the U.S. Senate. I had thought of a big reveal, but I still had no proof. Damn it. We arrived just in time for the big event. Carson had a large mansion near Provo with a small horse farm in the backyard. A large tent was erected for all the guests, and when we walked in, there stood the bastard himself, Dave Carson, at the head of the reception line like he was a king. As a widower, Carson did not have a wife to play hostess, but clearly recruited his 23-year-old daughter for the role. She stood next to her father, greeting guests as if she had been born to do so. When it was our turn, Carson smiled broadly at Emily and exclaimed, "Emily, you did it! How wonderful!" He kissed my wife chastely on the cheek, then turned to me. "Tom, I'm glad to see you again. I would be lost without your wife, but as I understand it, I will soon have to give her up when you start expanding your family." He laughed at his own joke. "Just let me take her when you're done with her, and there won't be any hard feelings," he added, laughing again. Emily even blushed a little, and I wanted to kill this grinning fool. I understood his hint, which apparently, in his opinion, went over my head. "Who knows what the future will bring?" I said in a flat, neutral tone, not hostile, but by no means friendly. I reported the audit results in the same way. Carson blushed slightly, and Emily elbowed me, muttering something about being rude. Carson smoothly turned to the next guest, leaving us alone with his daughter. Emily was an incredibly attractive woman, but Sarah Carson was a vision. Even in my inner rage, I noticed this. Her blonde hair and brilliant smile made me think of a young Grace Kelly. If Emily looked like a busty ballerina, Sarah looked like she belonged on a swimsuit pin-up calendar next to Kate Upton. She had the combination of good looks, a healthy figure, and hair and skin that photographers dreamed of, and often had to use Photoshop to achieve. Dave Carson had the perfect political family with a triple threat. He seemed ideal for the role of a wise statesman and family man. Losing his wife to cancer provided him with the ideal image. She was idolized, and any opponent who attacked her was prepared to commit career suicide. Sarah was the perfect PR queen. Utah State business and law major, former gymnast, and now Utah State cheerleader. According to Emily, Sarah was planning to try out for the Broncos cheerleading squad at the next open competition, having just turned 23. With a saintly late wife and a smart, beautiful, photogenic daughter. The press would love him on the campaign trail. "Tom," Sarah said in an excited tone, hugging me tightly. This was not a polite hug at a party. It was a full-body compression, with parts of her body pressed against me in the most pleasant manner. "You look great. No wonder Emily hid you away. You never come to any of our parties. You shouldn't work so hard. It's bad for your health." Somehow, she got it all out in one breath. In less than a second, my mood changed from rage to complete shock. I said a few polite words about how beautiful she looked and was about to leave when two thoughts occurred to me. First, Sarah never greeted Emily. And second, what kind of parties was she referring to? Emily didn't give me a chance to ask, as she rushed with her own greeting to the young woman. Then we had no choice but to give way to the next guest in line. When Emily and I went to hang out, I wondered what Sarah knew. After pouring my wife a drink, I asked, what parties was Sarah talking about? Emily just smiled and snorted dismissively. She was just teasing, little brat. Dave sometimes holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He says he thinks better with a drink in his hand. And at a bar, you never know who might be in the next booth. She was home several times when we met here. Don't tell anyone, but Dave allowed her to drink at home before she turned 23. Well, it got me thinking. This bastard had his fling with my wife right here in his home, under the guise of team meetings. These could even be actual meetings that Emily was the last to leave. Or perhaps she left first and came back after everyone else had gone. This would prevent the legal team from speculating about why Emily always stayed behind to help her boss clean up the mess. With his wife dead and his daughter away at college, he didn't need to find a secluded hotel room. Therefore, there was no record of their meetings. So, does Sarah attend your team meetings? I asked. Emily brushed off the question. No, she was at home several times when her classes were cancelled. She's just teasing her dad about partying during work hours. She pulled my hand. Come on, honey, buy your young wife a drink. For the next hour, Emily never left my side. We talked to a few of her co-workers, and several people brought up our plans to have a baby and how sad they would be to lose Emily for a while, but how happy they were for us. To be honest, I was a little embarrassed. Why did all these people know about our plans? An hour later, Dave Carson called everyone to attention. His daughter stood smiling next to him. He started by thanking everyone for coming and then announced his big campaign. Everyone expected this, but they were still excited. I noticed the local newspaper publisher with one of his reporters nearby, taking notes. I had no doubt that there would be a big article about this in tomorrow's newspaper. I won't bore you with the rest of the party details. It would have been a pleasant time if my heart hadn't been shattered and my brain hadn't been working on overdrive thinking about how to prove it all. About an hour and a half after the grand announcement, Margaret Williams, the first assistant district attorney, came in and said that Dave wanted to meet with his staff. While Dave was an elected official, Margaret was a senior manager who essentially ran the office. Prosecutors might come and go every 4 years, but Margaret was a constant. She was a very tough woman, but at the same time, very respected for her honesty and integrity in the legal community. The older woman lawyer was the main reason Emily took the position. I really liked her. Margaret had been married for over 30 years to an electrician who had put her through college and now owned a large electrical contracting company. The two were devoted to each other. I always thought of them as role models for Emily and me. Sorry for stealing your wife, Tom, Margaret offered. Dave wants to discuss the organization of the office when he starts campaigning. A moment later, they both left. I walked away from the small gathering of other spouses remaining at the meeting and headed to the other side of the large pool located across from the patio where the party was taking place. There was a wicker swing chair hanging on chains. It was in the shadows, so people could see me if they looked, but I wouldn't be conspicuous. In other words, it was the perfect place for me to try to collect my thoughts. Not having sat there for even 5 minutes, a voice invaded my solitude. So, this is where you're hiding, the voice purred. I looked up as Sarah slid into the wicker swing next to me. She positioned herself so that she was sitting facing me. Without saying a word, her little black dress sat on her tanned hips so that it hugged her body, hinting at what lay underneath without revealing anything, seductive and innocent at the same time. It speaks volumes about my state of mind that I noted this almost academically. You look like a person who has the weight of the world on his shoulders, she commented. I didn't really want to talk about this with my wife's lover's daughter, no matter how sexy she was. We're very busy in the office. There are a lot of audits going on, I said, ending the conversation. Is it true? Sarah asked interestedly. I just finished my last accounting course at university. We had several classes about the use of forensic accounting in law enforcement. I thought it was very exciting. Even in my grief, this surprised me. Is it true? I asked incredulously. Well, it's not sexy or anything, but it really is a detective's job, gathering all the right pieces of information from a ton of other facts and putting them together to get a clear picture. Plus, since some people try to hide this information, it becomes even more difficult. Most people don't think so, I admitted. Sarah began to talk in detail about what she had learned in the class and why she enjoyed it so much. I must say that I was impressed. I've had people finishing their internships at firms who couldn't speak so well on this topic. Focusing on her words really helped me push aside both her appearance and, more importantly, the anger that was simmering deep inside me. I felt immersed in the role of mentor, and this helped me push the emotional turmoil a little into the background. "You really like the course," I remarked. "It looks like you have mastered the topic very well." Sarah blushed at my praise. For a moment, the pin-up girl disappeared, and I saw a sweet girl genuinely touched by my simple praise. "I really thought about joining the FBI when I finished school. Dad wants me to either become a prosecutor or go work for one of his friends' law firms. I don't think this is what I want to do. You should follow your own dreams, not your father's dreams." That was honest advice, not that I was against ruining that freak's plans. I worked a little with the FBI when audits revealed something criminal. Sharp people. Before Sarah could respond, Emily stepped out of the shadows. "That's where you disappeared to. You didn't do anything indecent, did you?" she asked teasingly. Sarah turned to face my wife with a beaming smile. "We were just talking about Tom's work. We were just discussing this in class. I wanted to get an expert's opinion." "Well, Tom is like that," Emily said proudly. "I looked at one of his audit reports where an employee embezzled money using his boss's login. Tom realized that some of the transfers occurred while the guy was on a business trip, but the login was done from the corporate office. Most of us would have stopped when the boss was identified, but Tom continued to dig. I could have gotten a conviction against this employee the first day out of law school. Tom left prosecutors with nothing to do in the case." Emily looked at me with pride on her face as she told this little story. This confused the hell out of me. How could she be proud of me and claim to love me while she was in a 6-month relationship with her damn boss? A hint of confusion must have crossed my face because Emily asked, "What happened, dear?" "Nothing," I answered. "I was just thinking about the problem." "Well, stop it. It's a party," Emily said, admonishing. She barely caught her breath and said, "Tom, you will never be able to guess what opportunity I was given. Dave and Margaret want me to do some admin work as I plan to go on maternity leave as soon as your job is done. This way, when I leave, there will be no more hanging items. I will work directly for Margaret." Something in my heart skipped a beat at the thought of Emily being away from that bastard Dave. A second later, my hopes were dashed. "They have to travel sometimes," Emily continued. "I'll be delivering important papers to Dave during the campaign, so I won't be involved in his campaign, but I'll get to see some of the behind-the-scenes action. This will be so much fun." I felt my heart shatter again. I knew I heard Emily say she plans to end the affair so we could have a baby, but I could easily imagine her being unfaithful again in anticipation of being on the campaign trail. And if she gets pregnant, who's to say it will be my child? Dave is approximately my size and color. Without a DNA test, this would be very difficult to determine. My rage began to rise, but I suppressed it. Now was not the time. Sarah began talking to Emily about her new position and the campaign. They soon became engrossed in conversation, and I was forgotten. I took this opportunity to pull myself together. After tonight, I'll start planning. I needed to somehow counteract Dave's political power, but to be honest, I had no idea how to do it. 2 days later, the answer came to my office. "Your meeting for 2 is already here," my administrator called through the open door. I looked at my Outlook calendar and didn't see anything booked. Before I could answer, she came in. Sarah Carson. "Hey, Tom," she greeted as she entered. Her long blonde hair flowed over her shoulders. She wore a light sundress that showed off her gorgeous legs and strappy sandals that hugged her legs almost to her knees. Her breasts were modestly covered with no cleavage, but the material pressed against her chest in a suggestive manner. 2 thin straps held up the dress, leaving her arms bare. I was speechless as I watched her enter. "I hope you don't mind," Sarah began as she closed my office door behind her. "I told Mary that we had a meeting to discuss my career and how Emily was working for my father." I politely rose from my chair. "I'm glad to see you. Just working on some reports." I motioned for her to take one of the chairs in front of my table. After she sat down, I sat down too. "What did you want to talk about?" The happy expression suddenly disappeared from Sarah's face. "I think you know, Tom. I saw it in your face when you talked to my father. I'm really sorry that he's ruining such a good guy." I was stunned. This was not what I expected. "What are you talking about?" I asked carefully. Sarah blurted out, "That bastard known as my father is having an affair with your wife." I sat back in my chair, shocked. "Did you find out recently?" Sarah asked softly. I nodded. "I'm really sorry." "How? When did you find out?" I asked. "About 3 months ago," Sarah admitted. "I don't know when it started, but I found out about it in February. One Friday, I came home early, and they were holding one of their meetings at our house. I was having a late lunch with a school friend, and I popped in to drop off my things, say hello, and leave. Dad asked when I would be home, and I answered that it would be after dinner. It turned out that my friend got sick and couldn't come. I had a snack and went home. There, I saw Dad and Emily having their cozy kiss in our jacuzzi. I took photos and even filmed them running naked into the house. There was a full foot of snow on the ground." "Did you take pictures of your father's indiscretions?" I asked in shock. I was also wondering if I could get copies of the photos. This would be very helpful in a divorce. As if reading my thoughts, Sarah reached into her bag, pulled out a large envelope, and placed it on my desk. "Here are photographs from that day and several others." She paused and grinned. "Dad installed a security system in the house. The entire exterior is covered, and several interior rooms have cameras. If you know the site and have the key fob and password, you can access it from almost anywhere. There is a flash drive with video recordings." I was shocked by this. Dave's daughter conveyed to me everything that could be needed to divorce and destroy her father. "Why?" I asked. The sad expression on Sarah's face turned into anger. "Because he's a bastard," she said quietly. "I hate him more than you ever could." I didn't say anything but waited. After a moment, she spoke. "Dad met Mom when she was a college student. He was an aspiring lawyer assigned to the sex crimes unit in Salt Lake City. Mom came to study from Ireland. Her family was well off but died in the Londonderry bombing. She came here to get away from the turmoil." Her voice took on a soft note that she probably picked up from her mother. "Mom was dating some loser who hit her so hard she ended up in intensive care. Dad was entrusted with her case. They met, the loser went to jail, and a year later, they got married. My father was always ambitious. He got a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom got a strong man who would protect her. I appeared a few years later. Dad wanted me to do gymnastics. He thought a daughter competing in the Olympics would do wonders for his political career. Do you know how the careers of most gymnasts end?" Shaking my head, I replied, "I never thought about it." Sarah smiled bitterly. "They call it the 3 Bs, boobs, butts, and boys. I got the first 2. Dad shifted gears and told me to do cheerleading and be an all-American girl. I didn't mind. I loved performing. But by the age of 16, I realized I was just a prop for my father's ambitions. Mom knew about his affairs almost from the very beginning. He had them from the moment they got married. Mom knew and begged him to stop, but she was too weak to do anything about it. She felt trapped. She was a committed Catholic, so divorce was out of the question." Sarah paused for a moment, and I let her collect her thoughts. After a moment, she continued. "Sometimes I wonder if her poor reaction to cancer treatment was a result of her unconsciously wanting to die or actively sabotaging her treatment. Anyway, I was with her in the hospital when she died. The official story is that my father went to court and won a murder case. He forced the doctor to change the time of death. In fact, he had a little fun with his assistant in her apartment to celebrate. He simply presented my mother as a trophy, and the press loved the story of how they met. A heroic prosecutor saves a beaten woman. Damn that bastard. He himself beat her more than once, and I saw it." "Why are you telling me all this?" I was forced to ask. "Because you don't deserve it, Tom. My father is not a very good man. After my mother died, he hid his affairs until I left for college. Then he began to organize meetings in the house, not just for his work. He also hosts meetings for some of the charity groups he is involved with. I know for sure that he sleeps with 2 other women from these groups. One of the poor women actually thinks this is true love and plans to leave her husband." "Is this what Emily is thinking of doing?" I asked. I understood what I had heard, but I was still curious. Sarah shook her head. "No, she thinks it's just fun. They say that power is the main aphrodisiac. Emily seems to be proof of that. I heard her talking to my dad about some senator they were meeting with." "So what do you want?" I asked. To her credit, Sarah looked me straight in the eye as she answered, "I want you to get out of your marriage with this traitor. I want my father's career to be ruined to the point where he would never be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. I thought about just sending my material to the newspapers or even to the other party, but he has too many friends. I believe that together we can make them pay. Won't it be more difficult for you to finish school? I asked. She tossed her blonde hair again. No, my mother left me her inheritance as a trust fund. I haven't touched it, but if it came down to it, I could pay for the rest of my tuition and still have a nice cushion left over. If your mother had so much money, why didn't she take you and leave? She could have gone to Ireland, where your father wouldn't reach her. Sarah winced at the thought. She was raised Irish Catholic. She was taught that divorce was not an option, no matter what happened. My mother held on to her faith until the very end. This is the only thing that makes me think her death was unconscious and not intentional, since they also consider suicide to be the unforgivable sin. I must admit, I could not see anything but the truth in Sarah. She said she wanted to ruin her father's career, and the fact that I had this information did not bode well for his ambitions. I didn't think it could be some kind of trap. If Emily and Dave wanted to destroy me, they could do it openly in court. This kind of subtlety was only for those who were desperate, like me. A plan began to form in my head. I needed Sarah's help with a few things. If nothing else, it would show me how dedicated she was to destroying her father. Okay, I agreed. But I don't want to destroy him by publishing these pictures or even naming him in the divorce. Sarah looked at me in surprise. Why not? She demanded. Her face turned red with passion, and she took a breath to begin some speech. I stopped her with a raised hand. I didn't say we wouldn't destroy him, but I don't want to deal with the bad press of being the cuckold husband in a political scandal. Instead, I want to destroy what he has strived for all his life, destroy his power and influence, and I can have a nice quiet divorce that no one will worry about. Sarah looked at me with shock on her face. A minute later, a sly smile appeared. What do you want from me? I grinned. I'm going to do what I do best. Give me his financial documents, personal and for his campaign. They took Capone down thanks to tax evasion. Having met your father, I have no doubt that I can find something. And if not, she asked. I smiled. I can do one more thing. For the next 3 days, Sarah and I were busy. She installed a keystroke recorder on her father's personal laptop and home computer. She also took a full backup of his computer's hard drive. We configured their security system to upload records to a cloud space known to me, which was physically located abroad. For my part, I didn't need to listen to Emily's phone. Thanks to Sarah's evidence, I didn't need anything else. I activated a GPS tracker designed for parents keeping an eye on their children. Basically, it just used cell towers to determine the location, unless I sent a command to activate the GPS. I just didn't want her to find me at home while I was busy with work. I faked a groin injury the day after Sarah first came to see me. This gave me an excuse not to have any physical relationship with my wife. After learning about the number of Dave's partners, I didn't want to take any more risks than I had already unknowingly taken. Plus, I don't think I could have done it without my anger exploding. By the way, I made an appointment with the doctor to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases. Nothing was detected at first, but some, like HIV, can take months to test positive for antibodies. Emily went to the conference in Seattle for her last day with Dave. Annoyed and upset, no wonder she was very excited about the trip. My problem was that somewhere inside, I still loved her. I would never be able to trust her again, but that doesn't mean I didn't still love her. But I also couldn't bear the thought of intimacy with her after what I had found out. It was Thursday morning, and Emily, her bag packed, was waiting for Dave and the junior lawyer from their office, who was traveling with them to the conference. I wonder if the young guy knew he was their cover. So, we'll be home Sunday afternoon, Emily said, coming up to me after dropping her bag at the front door. I sat at the table with my back to her and sipped my coffee. She wrapped her arms around me and leaned down until her lips were next to my ear. I hope you feel better so we can start taking care of the baby, she whispered. Her tone would raise the dead, and her scent took me back to more innocent days. I wanted to cry right there, but I managed to restrain myself. I'll apply ice to help it heal, I assured her. I stroked her hand and kissed her forehead. She moaned. I wish I didn't have to go. It would be so much better to just stay home with you and be carefree all weekend. You can always tell Carson that something more important has come up, I said. It just came out. And by the way, she looked at me. She heard something in my tone. What's your problem with Dave? She asked in amazement. First, you were rude at the party, and now you talk like you hate this person. I forced myself to calm down and shrugged. Honestly, I've seen too many hot-headed jerks like Carson who think they're untouchable and the epitome of power. They're a big fish in a small pond. They sell the illusion of power and force people to buy into it. Like that mayor in Georgia last year. A big influential guy embezzled the city's money while sleeping with 3 married women. Now he's serving 10 years in federal prison, and they're all divorced and publicly humiliated. I get the same feeling from Carson. If he gets to Washington within a week, he'll be seducing clueless interns. But eventually, the wheels of his car will fall off, and when that happens, I wouldn't want to be in a hotel somewhere nearby. Emily looked at me in shock. She had heard me rant about those bastards before, but I'd never associated Carson with them. I probably should have kept my mouth shut, but it felt good to let it out. And although the marriage was over, I also felt it was only fair to warn Emily. I still love her, even if I would never trust her again. Tom, that's terrible, what you said about Dave, Emily protested. He is a good person who has done a lot for the people of this district. He's not like that. I heard an almost pleading tone in her denial. At a time that could not have been predicted, we heard the sound of a car horn outside the house. Dave had arrived. Emily let out a frustrated sigh. She gave me a look that quickly turned into a mixture of regret and fear. I'll be home in 4 days, Emily said conciliatorily. We could talk about it then. But get ready, love, we have a child to start with. Then she wrapped her arms around me and kissed me passionately. I responded with an equally passionate kiss. Have a nice week, she breathed. I love you. I love you too, I replied. She grabbed her bag and opened the front door. Bye, dear, she called over her shoulder. Goodbye, Emily, I said. Then I closed the door. 30 minutes later, I left by train for the city. Sarah and I had an appointment with the FBI. It turned out that I did not need to prepare any evidence. I would rate Dave Carson's embezzlement skills as moderately smart. Sarah and I met at her off-campus apartment to review the documents she had pulled from his computer. Overall, pretty standard methods. I estimated he had about $1.3 million stashed away in an offshore account. At least that's what he transferred to it. But I couldn't be sure it was still there because those records weren't included. Much of this money came from various small donors who wouldn't raise suspicion from the IRS. But why were people from out of state donating to the Dawes campaign? I was able to trace some of them to defendants whose cases were dismissed or entered into plea agreements with unusually lenient sentences. It was Sarah who found the biggest bong. It turned out that she was not the only child. Along the way, Carson had fathered 2 more children. One of them was born 3 years before the death of his wife. His mother was one of his employees at the time. The 3rd child, born 8 months after his wife's death, was born to an 18-year-old volunteer at the hospital where his wife was being treated. Carson gave each woman $3,000 a month in campaign contributions as political research consultants. Sarah almost destroyed her own apartment in anger. That red hair really is a warning. By the time Emily and Dave left, we had already checked everything in Dave's notes. Questions remained, but we did not have enough resources to get the information. So I wrote down all my findings and set up a meeting with the senior FBI agent I worked with in the Salt Lake City office. Sarah came to tell him the story we had made up. Sarah said that after taking a forensic accounting course, she wanted to look at real documents. She decided to look at her father's notes out of innocent curiosity. When she noticed some strange things, she called me because my wife worked for her father and she knew about my experience. Gary, the agent, was a seasoned professional. He knew there was more to it, but we dropped a gift-wrapped present in his lap, so he didn't press the issue. A dirty prosecutor in his own backyard, a dirty prosecutor who just launched a campaign for the U.S. Senate. This career-making thing feels like manna from heaven. We caught a taxi to Sarah's apartment since she had a late class, and I walked to the Union Station to catch the train home. I thought about packing my things and leaving when Emily got home. Gary promised to expedite the case to at least subpoena Carson's documents by Wednesday. It's unlikely that much time will pass before word of the investigation becomes known. The bastard will find out how illusory his power is when all the rats leave his ship. Emily called me while I was on the train home. She said she called early because they were going to have some big dinner, and it would be very late before she got back to her room. I had no doubt that tonight she didn't plan to stay in her room at all. I made some vague remarks, saying that everything was fine. She caught my distracted tone and asked what was the matter. I just had a meeting with some FBI agents about something, I replied. I'm on the train, and besides, the investigation is still ongoing, so I can't talk about it. "Oh, you're no fun," Emily pouted. "Don't worry, love, your secret is safe with me." We said our goodbyes, and she switched off. When I entered the house, it all just amazed me. My marriage was over. We dated and were married. We were together for 10 years. I never expected to be single again, but now that's exactly what I was about to do. In the end, I just sat on the couch and waited for the sun to set. I just sat and watched. I felt like I was watching my life sink into the horizon. I just watched. It was many hours after sunset before I moved again. It was midday on Saturday when I came out of my self-pitying fit. I won't say I didn't deserve some slack, but I knew I needed to shake things up. Ironically, I was mowing the lawn again when I saw a BMW convertible pull into my driveway. I stopped the mower and watched Sarah get out of the car. The first thing I saw was her long, pale legs sticking out from the driver's side. She was again wearing sandals with thin cords that wrapped around her calves. They always made me think of the ancient Greeks. As she stepped out, I saw her sculpted legs flex, indicating strength beneath her firm flesh. In keeping with the Greek theme, she wore a pure white toga-like dress that ended mid-thigh, but with 5 centimeters of lace at the bottom, allowing her upper thighs to be seen. The dress was made of a light, silky material that hugged her curves and tended to be semi-sheer. Her perky breasts were supported by a bikini top that was visible through the dress. Her arms were free of everything except the light freckles that dotted her skin on her upper arms and shoulders. The dress only went down one shoulder, leaving the other bare. Long blonde hair fell in waves onto the same shoulder. However, it was her gray-green eyes and smile that caught my attention as she approached me. I turned off the engine and greeted her. "Well, you look better than I expected," Sarah said. "I half expected to have to take you out of the bottle or off the ledge." I snorted. "Last night, I had a lot of thoughts about both options. We had to do this," I said. "Besides, it distracts me." "Have you met with a lawyer?" she asked. I shrugged. "I did it on Tuesday before they left. The documents will be ready on Monday. I agreed to audit a client in Austin and leave on Tuesday. Usually, I spend 3 days on such business trips and then work remotely until I complete the report. In this case, I will be there for all 3 weeks. I shrugged again. This is probably a coward's way out, but I don't want to be here when all this mess starts brewing. I saw agreement on Sarah's face. She knew that this would draw attention to her as the daughter of this bastard. "Well, I'm glad you're thinking ahead," the redhead said, "but I realized that this is what you're good at." That smile again. "Now I can plan too." "Okay, here's my plan," Sarah announced. "I'll help you finish your work here, and then you'll come to me. We'll have fun, and you'll even be able to look at me in that swimsuit I promised." "Sarah, I'm still married," I protested, "and I don't think I'll be ready for anything for a while." "You need to let off some steam before you explode," the sexy redhead insisted. "Besides, you know the saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander." Her gaze was playful, sly, and artless at the same time. I couldn't help but laugh. In one of those bizarre coincidences that prove truth is stranger than fiction, we ran into Anna after finishing my yard work. I cleaned up, and we went for a late lunch at a nice restaurant. I wasn't in the mood for revenge, but it was nice to get out of the house, and going somewhere with such a sweet girl like Sarah was not at all difficult. As I approached the restaurant, I noticed that a car was parked outside. It was Anna's car. I almost told Sarah to turn around and find another place, but I didn't. Instead, I did something completely out of character for me. It was all on a whim. After all my careful planning, something just snapped inside me when I saw Anna's car parked in that lot. I casually hugged the red-haired beauty and led her into the restaurant without further ado. There, I gave the owner a tip so that he could seat us at a certain table. It was somewhat obscure but visible when returning from the toilet. I sat Sarah down facing outward and sat down next to her. She smiled when I took her hand. "Why did it happen?" She smiled sweetly. "Not that I'm complaining." I laughed. "Do you remember I told you about how I found out about my wife's betrayal? About her friend Anna?" "So her car is parked right on the street." Sarah burst into throaty laughter. "So I can be the other woman? Oh, I can live with that." She leaned forward and kissed me softly on the lips. It was not a deep, passionate kiss, but rather a kiss that hinted and promised much more, a lover's kiss. Our dishes arrived, and I frankly enjoyed myself. The tricks were forgotten as I enjoyed Sarah's company. Her witty sense of humor was killing me. I've never heard accounting sound so dirty before. I happened to look back and noticed Anna walking past us. I pointed it out to Sarah. "Oh my God," she giggled. "I was so looking forward to this." With that, she leaned forward to kiss me. I felt my hand reach under the table and rest on her leg. The skin of her thighs was so incredibly soft, and underneath were firm, elastic muscles. The touch was electric. I was so lost in the sensation that I was surprised when I heard Anna screaming at me. "Tom, what the hell are you doing?" she shouted at me. "Who is this woman? Running away from your wife while she's out of town? I thought better of you." I have no doubt that the entire restaurant heard her. I let go of Sarah and turned to look at my ex-girlfriend. "What's your problem, Anna? It's just a little carefree fun before Emily and I settle down and have a baby. And could you keep it down? People are trying to eat." Anna stared at me as if I had hit her with a dead fish. "What?" she began. "Oh, come on, Anna. Emily does the same. I'm sure she's having fun with her boss right now and has been for several months now, so I decided it was only fair that I seduced the boss's daughter." I think Anna almost had a heart attack right there. Feeling Sarah start to giggle, I gave her a gentle squeeze to keep her quiet. "You know about it?" Anna stuttered. "I know that I'm supposed to be a faithful, ignorant husband while my wife runs around, being so ably helped by a woman whom I considered my close friend," I replied. Anna turned pale at this. "Go away, Anna," I said. She turned and ran away from the table. A few minutes later, we heard a noise. It was Anna leaving the restaurant. "Well, it was fun while it lasted," Sarah said with a slight laugh. "I really wanted her to stay here longer." Her smile made me blush. "You know she's probably on the phone with your wife right now," she added. "Perhaps," I agreed. "I give her 5 minutes before my phone goes off. However, if she left right now, it would be a 5-hour drive home from Seattle. This will give us time for dessert and give me enough time to drive home and pack my things. It's a pity that I won't see you in a bikini like you promised." Sarah laughed again. "I guess we can do this another time." She reached out to grab my shirt and pulled me closer. "You know, my semester ends in a week and a half," she muttered in my ear. "I always wanted to see Austin." I barely caught her words as her tongue slipped into my ear. Emily started calling me 10 minutes after Anna left the restaurant. I listened to a few of her messages, and she was furious that I was having fun with someone else. This almost made me laugh. After an hour of her messages and texts, I blocked her number. I knew she would eventually just call from another phone, but she was driving back from Seattle, so she couldn't just ask to borrow someone's phone on the highway. When I got home, I packed all my personal belongings, not just my stuff for the trip to Austin. I had time, hours after meeting Anna. I was leaving my home for what might be the last time. After booking a hotel room near the Salt Lake City airport, I put most of my belongings in storage until I found a place to stay. I talked to Sarah on the phone several times. She was walking with a friend because her father was now leaving furious messages on her phone. I moved my flight to Austin a day early and left on Monday morning. Emily managed to call my phone several times from other numbers. Now it was a tearful rant about how I could do this to her, why I ruined her career. Obviously, Anna's initial screams attracted the attention of many people. Then someone posted a pretty accurate comment on their blog and called Sarah and me gamers. My comment about Emily having fun with Dave was also posted, along with the fact that they were together in Seattle over the weekend. This caused quite a stir in the county's political circles and at the courthouse. For the rest of the week, I avoided most news from Salt Lake City. It wasn't until Friday that I received a letter telling me what was going on in Sandy. Surprisingly, it was a letter from Margaret, the senior manager in the DA's office. The elderly lawyer apologized for everything that happened. She knew that Dave had been seeing 2 women outside the office, but she knew nothing about Emily's involvement. She also praised me for taking revenge by using the law against the lawyer. "It was an eventful week in the Salt Lake County DA's office," Margaret said. Dave was in the office Monday morning, trying to deal with the fallout and denying any inappropriate behavior on his part. "This is just my daughter's rebellion under the influence of her unfaithful husband," was the story he was trying to sell. Then, on Tuesday, Emily was served with divorce papers on the grounds of adultery. The envelope contained photographs, DVDs, and a letter from me. Emily's scream of horror when she read my letter caused Margaret and 2 other people to run into her office. Emily fell into a chair in shock, and Margaret noticed the photographs that had fallen out onto the table. In my letter to Emily, I told her that I was not having an affair, but hoped that she now had an idea of how I felt about her and this jerk. I told her I couldn't be married to someone I couldn't trust, especially now that I knew she had been unfaithful before. There was little activity at the Dawes office Tuesday. The next day, Margaret was in Dave's office for a meeting when 4 men in suits suddenly walked in. Dave yelled at them for interrupting an important meeting. When one of the men told Dave that he was under arrest, she said he was in complete shock. When he was handcuffed and taken out of the office, they led him right out the front door of the courthouse and past reporters who had somehow been alerted. I owe Gary a few beers for this. At the end of her letter, Margaret apologized for allowing them to behave this way in her office. She also asked me to let her know if I needed anything because I didn't deserve this kind of behavior. I'm sure part of her letter was about damage control, but mostly I think Margaret was the moral and professional person I always took her to be. Now, all my plans for a quiet divorce have gone to hell because of my own stupid, impulsive prank with Anna in that restaurant. Salt Lake City news stations quickly learned of Dave's arrest and the charges against him. As I told Emily, this story had all the makings of a summer romance, sex, betrayal, revenge, and too much anger. The news media loved it, and it was quickly picked up by hungry 24-hour news outlets. I avoided the worst because I was out of town, and they were unable to track me down because I had booked a second hotel room 10 miles away from the one on my work itinerary. However, I checked in there, and reporters were stationed around it, trying to catch me. I saw on TV that they were camped in front of my house. Emily didn't come out, and they only filmed my relatives coming in and out. Sarah had it the worst of all. She was the daughter who betrayed her own father. She still had to go to classes and take exams, so for the first few days, it was quite easy for the media to find her. The school then forced the reporters to leave campus because they were disturbing students. It also helped that 2 women who had children with Dave came forward to get their 15 minutes of fame. With her final exams complete, Sarah slipped out of campus and headed to the airport. The media were disappointed but not too surprised when she didn't show up for the graduation ceremony. After a while, this story became a side news story and stayed there. It boiled over when Dave's trial began, but he pleaded guilty to several charges, resulting in him becoming a 20-year-old guest of the federal government. Fortunately, his guilty plea meant that Sarah and I were not called to testify. Then the case completely disappeared from their radar, taking Sarah, Emily, and me with it. Oddly enough, after all this publicity, my divorce went quickly and with minimal fuss. Emily signed the papers 4 days after receiving them. I received a letter apologizing for what she did to me and to us. Furious, returning from Seattle, she swore that she would never forgive me for betraying her. Finding out that she was, in fact, the only one being unfaithful made her realize how hypocritical she had been. She accepted my offer of a 50-50 split and simply asked that at some point, when things weren't so rough, I would agree to meet with her so she could apologize in person. At the end, she said that she would always love me and wish me well. I later learned from her mother that she had quit her job and moved to the Midwest to live with her aunt. Finding Dave did wonders for my career in the press. The FBI gave me full credit for analyzing Dave's tapes. Since I was in from the same press, I was even more thorough in my work in Austin and found not only the embezzler they were looking for, but also a second one about whom, at that time, they had no information. My firm promoted me and put me in charge of the white-collar crime team. And yes, some joker labeled the team Tom's Heroes. But the best part was when they assigned me an assistant, a recent college graduate wishing to gain experience in forensic accounting. I've never enjoyed working late so much. And that bikini looked even better on the floor of my hotel room. Thanks for watching. What would you do if you found out your spouse was unfaithful with their boss? Let us know in the comments below.
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode. Brother, I'm Jack, host of this podcast, and it's great having you here. If today's story hit home, send it on to a buddy who might need it. Remember, we're all in this together, turning life's curvy balls into wins. If you have an opinion or story to share, then drop a line in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep pushing forward. Stay strong, folks.